Each of us wants to save money when buying a home. This is a correct logical motivation. Saved means earned, right? Jewish wisdom. Let's talk about how you can save on buying real estate in Poland.
In fact, there are mandatory taxes that each of us must pay when purchasing real estate in Poland, whether you want to or not. However, there are certain benefits that can help you save. Let's take a closer look at which taxes must be paid and how you can avoid paying them conditionally. The first mandatory tax is called PCC, which stands for the tax on civil law transactions. It must be paid when buying a car or real estate. And for new properties, when buying an apartment in the primary market, the tax is 0%. That is, the state immediately exempts us from this as if promoting the idea of buying new properties. For secondary market properties, it's 2%.
Section at questions. If I buy a second new property, meaning I buy a new home, but it's my second or third apartment, do I pay the tax?
No.
So any new property, zero tax.
But there's a nuance, I'll mention it right away. If you buy 6 or more apartments in one residential complex or in one entrance or on one floor, then you will have to pay 6% tax on each subsequent apartment.
6 apartments. That's what you call a good problem to have.
Yes, this is exactly for investors. You know, they came up with this rule. If it's for personal needs and if you need to sell an apartment, move to a bigger or more distant one, it doesn't matter. Change it as an individual. For housing needs, then, of course, you don't need to pay such a tax. In the secondary market, there is a tax that amounts to 2%. These 2% can also be avoided. Now, I'll tell you how. If this is your first property in life, it's important, not just in Poland, but in life, then you can avoid paying this tax. What else is important if you own property? If you already own somewhere, but only 50%, this tax can also be avoided. Few people talk about this, and not even all notaries mention it. When purchasing property, there is a section where you declare whether this is your first property or not, or if you own no more than 50% of it.
And here's a popular question that our curious subscribers will write in the comments. What if I have an apartment in Ukraine and Belarus?
In fact, what surprises us is that everyone honestly admits it. We never recommend lying. So, whether to lie or not, to hide the fact of having an apartment or not, is always the choice of our buyer. However, what's important is if you hide. The fact of having an apartment in Ukraine, the tax authorities will definitely find out about it, because there is an exchange of data between tax registries, so the tax authorities will definitely find out about it. If you hide the existence of an apartment or any housing in Belarus, most likely the tax authorities will not find out about it in the near future. Definitely, because these two countries are not very friendly with each other and there is no exchange of information. Usually, citizens of Belarus, our clients, do not pay such a tax. So they say, yes, this is my first one. Then in the end, if suddenly in 5-10 years this comes to light, I think the most you can do is play dumb. Oh, I didn't know. I thought it had to be the first one in Poland. We definitely do not recommend doing this. It is always the buyer's responsibility, of course. So that's a fact.
And the risk is that if the state finds out that you actually had an apartment, but you stated in the declaration that you didn't, then you'll have to pay this tax, 2%.
Some kind of fine.
And I think they'll hit you with a fine.
Yes, the fine is always from 5,000 zlotys to 5 years of imprisonment.
So they have a small margin? Yes. Like a menu,
Of fines. And it's always individual. Well, kind of always. Each tax case is considered individually. So I think that if you're a foreigner, who doesn't know the language well, most likely you'll just get away with a fine, or maybe even just a warning, like tisk, 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 don't do that again. Here, it's always individual. It even depends on the inspector's mood. We explain what can be done, what is better not to do, and then you decide what is more beneficial for you, yes, and how to proceed.
Great, you've watched up to this point, which means you're really interested in real estate in Poland. Support us by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and leaving a comment below the video. And if you're interested in professional assistance with buying, selling, or renting real estate in Poland, you can contact us. You'll find all the links below the video. And let's continue watching the episode.
When purchasing real estate, there are other taxes that do not have exemptions. That is, in any case, you have to pay them. This is VAT, which is included, for example, in the price when buying a new property. So as an individual, you won't be able to get it back. This is a tax on the property you already own. Usually these are small amounts, something like 50-70 zlotys per year that you pay. So these are generally things you pay and forget about. At the same time, importantly, you will be selling your property. And when selling property, we know that you need to pay 19%. Thank you. Of the income you received from the margin, right? From the profit, yes, 19%. That needs to be paid from your margin. That is your markup on the amount for which you bought the property. For example, you bought property for 800,000, sell it for 1 million, and you need to pay from the 200,000, 19% tax. That is 38,000 zlotys.
I understand that you often calculate this for clients, right?
Well, yes, of course. It's important that firstly, when selling this property, it's important to consider all the expenses for this apartment that you incurred during the purchase. For example, payment for realtor services. The second point is any renovation work. It's important to have invoices, some receipts, confirmations that you paid for this. And this can also be added to the expenses. So instead of 800, you would have 830, for example.
And you can do this directly as an individual.
Of course.
You don't need to open a branch of judicial offices for this because people will write that our viewers on the channel are already knowledgeable. They know what income, expenses, and everything else are. So if I understand correctly, in other words, you can buy an apartment today, wait a year for it to increase in value. During this time, you did some renovations, paid for realtor services. All of this also went into expenses, and essentially you can pay, that is, you can actually write off a lot as expenses and pay a minimal tax.
Yes, let me explain. So for example, the apartment cost 800 and some additional services and renovations cost another 50,000. So our expense is 850 and you sell it for 1 million and you already pay. The tax of 19% is not on 200,000 but on 150. Yes, exactly. This tax can be avoided, it's 19%. Now I'll explain how. That's a twist. There are two ways, yes. The first way is to live in this apartment or own it for at least 5 years. So if 5 years pass and you sell this property, then you don't need to pay any capital gains tax. And the second point, if 5 years have not passed and you sell this apartment, you still have 3 years from the moment of sale to buy a new one for the same amount or a larger amount. If you reinvest this money, and importantly anywhere in the European Union, not just in Poland, then you also don't need to pay this tax. Or if you have already paid it, well, because you have 3 years for this. Yes, if 2 years have passed and you bought something, you can ask the Polish tax office to refund this amount of money to you.
And how does this technically happen? So a sale transaction has occurred. I sold my property and 3 years haven't passed yet. I still don't know if I will buy a new one or not. I need to sort of pay extra from the start.
Yes, when calculating your annual tax return, you indicate the transaction. Yes, and from this you calculate the tax.
Yes, but later if I paid it, yes, sort of as a prepayment. But if I end up buying an apartment in a year, then I will simply request a refund of this tax. It turns out to be in 2 years.
Yes, and they will return it to you. That's how it works.
And it can be an apartment in Spain, in France, not necessarily in Poland.
Yes, correct.
Interesting. And what do you think? Why do they do this? Why does the government... Well, it's not profitable for them. They could just take this tax. Why do they do this? What is the motivation? To keep more money within the economy? Or...
Actually, in Poland, the national sport for the last 20 years has been flipping real estate. That is, in general, 60% of all residential real estate has always been purchased by investors and flippers. In every country, there are some internal mechanisms, tightening of regulations for investors and flippers, so that the average person, Jan Kowalski, working at a regular job for a regular salary, having 2 regular kids and a regular wife, just an average person, so that he could buy himself an average apartment like that. That's why now in Spain there is talk about 100% tax on real estate purchases, because in the last couple of years investors have been buying up all of Spain, that is the southern and eastern coast.
Well, essentially they flip it, and in doing so they slightly boost the market.
Yes, that's also true.
That the transaction slightly boosts the market and the real estate prices increase even more over the year.
Yes, and of course it's very important for the government to settle Jan Kowalski in this country, so that for the next 50 years he would have children, pay taxes, and contribute a small micro percentage to the GDP, rather than having trendy Ukrainians, Scandinavians, and Chinese come and buy everything up because they have money, leaving the ordinary workers with nothing.
Guys, write in the comments what you think. Let's listen to people's opinions, what they think. Why Poland? is making this structure in the form of 3 years and 5 years. In general, guys, write in the comments what you think, why Poland is doing this. Everything is stable there.
You can negotiate with the seller to split the notary fees with you.
The commission, right? Oh, the notary.
Yes, that's all. That's individual. Usually the first preliminary contract is paid half and half, and the second is always the buyer's responsibility. You can negotiate there too, but generally you won't negotiate. You'll just ask for a discount of 2,000 more zlotys, and that's it. An important point, Basta, is the question, if I, for example, sold an apartment and then reinvested that money within 3 years, but not the entire amount, a smaller amount.
Well, yes, on the contrary, less.
Yes.
Not the same or more, but less.
Yes. Do I need to pay tax on the remaining amount? Yes, you do. We'll just display the formula on the screen to calculate it. People can just calculate it for themselves. Overall, it's not that much. So it's very, very necessary to reinvest in order not to pay this tax.
And can we also discuss the credit history, whether it affects taxes or not? That is, does it affect if you sell an apartment for more, but you had a mortgage on it that you were paying? Or are these unrelated things and your obligations with the bank are one story and with the state?
Yes, the interest you pay to the bank is not considered your expenses when acquiring real estate. So look, it's important. These are expenses when acquiring real estate, including renovation work. But operating expenses, that's something else. I mean, like, I buy toilet paper for this apartment, but I'm not going to count that as an expense, right? Yes, that's a bit different.
Thank you for watching this video. I believe it was useful for you. And if so, support us by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And below the video, there's a comment section. Ask your questions, discuss the episode, and we will be happy to answer your questions.